Dobroveče i dobrodošli u Klub A. Večeras ćemo govoriti o odnosima Evropske banke za obnovu i razvoj i Crne Gore, i to u svjetlu upravo završene posjete delegacije EBRD-a u Podgorici. Naš večerašnji gost je predsjednik te finansijske organizacije, gospodin Suma Chakrabarti. As far as I know, Montenegro government and EBRD have made together a strategy for the next 4 years. What are the main goals?
So we are about to finalize our country strategy for Montenegro for the next 4 years. That's right. We have 3 themes essentially. The first is to improve the competitiveness of the private sector in Montenegro. I mean, it's very clear that in Montenegro you import a lot of things that you could produce locally, and one of the reasons that doesn't happen locally is because the private sector isn't as competitive as it should be, for example in agriculture. So we want to improve the competitiveness of the private sector, particularly I think with a focus on the agribusiness value chain. That's number one. Secondly, I think it's very important to continue the work that we have been doing in Montenegro and in the Western Balkans generally to improve connectivity and really to try and focus on energy and transport links in the region. And that's going to be a very important part of what we continue to do. Now the third area, I think, is the whole area of sustainable energy, renewable energy, and sustainable tourism. This is an area where we think Montenegro has a comparative advantage over many other countries. We've started some work on it. For example, the first large-scale private sector wind farm is here. It's going to produce 7% of Montenegro's energy. I think we must do a lot more of that, but with a particular focus, I think, also on tourism, because as we all know, Montenegro is a great tourist destination, and that's a very good earner of foreign exchange, and we need to help with that, but within a sustainable way. Those are the 3 big themes we will pursue.
How long EBRD is present in Montenegro, and what is a fund of loans?
Well, for a number of years, really now. I mean, if you take the last 10 years, particularly, since Montenegro became an independent nation once again, we have really been increasing our investment in Montenegro. So the last 10 years, it's 530 million euros, over 50 projects now. But what's really interesting about that is I think in the last 3 years that we have really scaled up. I visited 3 years ago. I said the Western Balkans is a priority, Montenegro is a priority, and the team has delivered. And I'm very proud of them for that. About 250 million euros worth of investment in just the last 3 years. The other thing to bear in mind, Montenegro has quite a small population, as you know. Yeah. But if you compare with the 36 other countries that we're in, so we are in 37 countries where we're investing, we have the highest level of investment per head of population in Montenegro. It's number 1 amongst all those countries. And I think that's for a good reason. We've had a real push on trying to do more in the region generally, but also in small countries like Montenegro. So I'm proud of that effort.
EBRD has also entered in some Montenegrin enterprises. Based on what criteria do you make these decisions?
Well, I think partly this is also a function of the fact that we didn't really start investing in Montenegro on its own until 2006. So we had a lot of catching up to do, whereas in other countries we started back in 1991, 92. So in a way they had a spurt very early on, a big push, and then they sort of leveled away. Whereas Montenegro, we're still in the growth phase, if you like. So it is partly that we started later, but also I think it's because Montenegro has been doing some things which has made it very attractive for us and investors to come and invest more. I'll give you another example. Today I went to see Voli. This is a company which you know very well. It's the largest retailer in Montenegro. It's a company with which we've had a relationship since 2009, so 3 years after we started here. Firstly, we provided some loans really to help them expand, and now we're actually a co-owner of Voli. We've taken equity in the company. Why is that? Because we think it's a company that can expand regionally, firstly, but it's also a company that has potential to really impact on the agribusiness value chain, if you like, in the country to try and improve the standards in the value chain, and that will really help Montenegro because it will mean the private sector in Montenegro becomes more competitive. And again, that may well reduce the need for imports if local producers can produce more for the country.
For which economic sectors do you approve loans in Montenegro?
So our general approach to whether it's debt finance or equity is three criteria. First of all, is the proposal a bankable proposal? This is extremely important. In other words, is it a commercially viable proposal? We are a bank, but we're a different type of bank. So our second criteria is, are we additional? In other words, if a commercial bank would do this investment, then there's no need for EBRD. So we should only really be involved when a commercial bank won't do it, won't take the risk. So additionality is the second criteria. And the third criteria, we always try and assess each proposal against whether it's going to really help the company or the sector or the country move towards a more market-based model. That's what we were set up to do. So it's called the transition impact. Those are the three criteria. Now, we take decisions, as you say, sometimes to provide equity rather than loan finance. Usually we like to start with debt financing, as in the case of Volley. But then as we see the company improve and its prospects grow, when we're trying particularly to raise the standards of the company, improve corporate governance, improve the way it uses resources, then it's important for us, I think, to feel that we're also a shareholder in the company, to take ownership as well, to take a share of the ownership. And that's what we've done. Now again, it's extremely important that EBRD is a medium to long-term shareholder because we are there for the long term, but we're not there forever because that would be not really helping the company in the long term. We have to take a 5-7 year horizon usually in terms of our ownership, and then we would exit because the company would be able to stand on its own feet without our help. That's the thinking that we do when we take an equity shareholding.
For which economic sectors in Montenegro do you approve loans?
Well, I think we are always open to a number of sectors. I mean, one of the usual sectors is the financial sector, but in the case of Volley, obviously, it's a retail sector as well. So those are two, usually the corporates and the financial sector, two sectors we particularly focus on.
What do you think, how to strengthen sector of small and medium enterprises here?
Well, this is a very, very important issue in Montenegro and in other countries too. I strongly believe that the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, are the backbone of any well-functioning economy. So, of course, I mentioned earlier on the investment numbers in Montenegro by EBRD, but I'm just as proud, in fact, it's really important to say this, just as proud of the advice that EBRD has given to over 550 Montenegrin SMEs in the last few years. We reached the very, very small companies in rural areas, not just working in Podgorica or the bigger cities and towns, really right out in the rural areas. And we've given them advice on how to improve their IT, how to improve their marketing, how to improve their governance, how to improve their management, how to improve their sort of accounting standards. All of these things, their financial reporting and environmental management, these are all things that companies need to do at SME level to become better companies. And this is great. I think we've seen now 2/3 of those companies that we have given advice to, 2/3 have improved their turnover in the last few years. That's a real sign of the success of that program. And I'm also proud that in that program, in recent years, we have had a Women in Business program, and we've reached 15 companies now, small companies which are led by female entrepreneurs. This is very important for me and for the organization because in many of our countries of operation, female-led companies tend to have a much harder time getting access to finance, getting access to markets for a variety of reasons. And we want to help those companies as well get to the marketplace. So I'm very proud of the Women in Business program as well, again focusing on small companies.
How do you see Montenegrin public finances, and what are the forecasts for economic growth?
Economic growth, first of all, I think it's really good to see in the whole of the Western Balkans growth figures are going up again. It was tough, wasn't it, after the financial crisis? And I'm very pleased that in Montenegro we saw growth of over 3% last year, 3.2% I think it was. And EBRD is forecasting for this year 3 to 4% and for the same for next year. But we actually think the growth rates in Montenegro could be even higher in the future, provided the momentum of reform continues as part of the EU approximation process. Now, macroeconomic management, handling of the budget, and is going to be very, very important. I think it's important to make sure that public debt levels are kept under good management. It's also important, I think, to make sure the current account deficit is kept under bounds, because it's actually quite a large current account deficit. This reflects, of course, the point I was making earlier, that Montenegro imports a lot of produce, which I believe could be made locally by local farmers, local producers in the future. And that is one of EBRD's responsibilities, that we must try and help the local companies grow faster in the future and become more competitive.
Is EBRD going to finance construction of Adriatic Union highway due to the fact that it is a trans-European corridor?
Yeah, this is an extremely important project, and in fact EBRD is in the lead at the moment on the feasibility study for this highway. So if the feasibility study shows that this project is a good, economically viable project, the cost-benefit analysis shows that, then yes, EBRD will be very interested in financing this project. It's something I think that's important politically, of course, in terms of joining up Greece all the way through to Croatia, through the Balkans. But actually, exactly, and from Greece all the way to Croatia. But it's also important in terms of the economic integration it offers, not just political integration, but economic integration, because the traffic will flow through the whole of the Western Balkans. So I think it's a landmark project in many ways. But as I say, we're doing the feasibility study now, we're financing that, and let's see what that shows. But if it shows it's a good project, we are definitely interested in financing it.
Brexit is still a highlight in the European Union. So are you going, because your headquarters is in London, are you going to move?
No, we're not going to move. I think it's absolutely clear that the headquarters has been very successful in London, and there is no need for the headquarters to move. Don't forget, the EBRD is not an EU institution. It has European in the title, but it's actually the largest shareholder is the United States. And there are Japan, Australia, Korea, North Africa, lots of non-European countries actually. And there are many European countries that are shareholders in EBRD who are not in the European Union. And for the moment anyway, the UK still is in the European Union. So I don't think the question of location really is the issue. It's been a very successful organisation with headquarters in London, resident offices everywhere in all our countries of operations, in Podgorica, for example, and I think it's a very nice model, and we should continue with that business model.
Whether is Brexit going to impact your policy and your finances?
No, so we've done a very good analysis of this, and actually Brexit has virtually no impact at all on us. We looked at the impact on the exchange rate, on the capital markets. I think the biggest issue in the future is whether we can still recruit in London, because we recruit a lot of people from the City of London, and so a lot will depend in terms of recruitment on what happens in the City of London. But for now, it looks like it's not really a big issue for us, as it might be for other EU institutions.
Mr. Chakrabarti, thank you for being our guest.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be back in Montenegro.
Poštovani gledalci, ostanite uz program Atlas televizije.